Let me set the scene for you. Spring of 90-80. The FBI's got a battering ram on a front door in Long Island. Henry Hill's about to have the worst day of his life. But the person who fascinates me isn't Henry. It's the woman upstairs with a bag of powder worth more than most people's cars, Karen. She hears the chaos downstairs, and she doesn't scream, she doesn't hide. She goes straight to the plumbing, 60 grand, poof, into the sewer system of Rockville Centre, cool as ice, like she was pouring out old coffee. Now, every time somebody talks about this movie, they talk about her like she's a tragedy. The poor wife, the girl who got tricked. And look, Lorraine gave one of the finest performances I've ever seen. I'll fight anybody who says different. But what Lorraine was playing and who Karen actually was, two very different women. The movie gives you a slow education. Karen gradually figures out her husband's a gangster. Real life, Karen could have written the textbook. She was hip to the hijackings and narcotics, Lufthansa, the whole operation. She wasn't sitting home watching soap operas wondering where the money came from. She was counting it. What I want to do today is peel back the Hollywood version and show you the woman underneath, because the real Karen was tougher, sharper, and dirtier than the script allowed. And the stuff Marty left on the cutting room floor, her sleeping with Henry's boss, what Tommy did to her, that would have turned the whole picture upside down. Karen never gave a single public interview. Think about that. Everybody else in this story sold their version. Henry couldn't shut up. But Karen? Silence. 40 years of silence. And in a world full of rats, that might be the most impressive thing anybody ever did. Before any of this, she was Karen Friedman, a kid from Brooklyn, 1946. Her folks were decent people, wanted her safe, wanted her comfortable, wanted her boring. Karen had zero interest in boring. She had ambition that didn't match her zip code. And when she met Henry Hill in 65, she was 19 and hungry for a life that didn't look like her mother's. Vario, the actual boss, he orchestrated the first meeting, put his own son on a double date, and sent Henry along as the spare. So the mob hand-delivered this girl, her future husband. That part never made it into the film the way it really happened. Henry botched it right away, ghosted her on the first real date. Any other girl cuts her losses. Karen, she chewed him out and then gave him a second shot. And right there, in that one decision, you can see the next 2 decades of her life. He'd disappoint her, she'd rage, and then she'd let him back in. Because the way the world opened up around Henry Hill was worth more to her than her own self-respect. He was a charmer, I'll give him that. Knew how to make a woman feel like she was the only person on earth. But he was also showing up at 3 a.m. with rolls of cash and no explanations. Karen saw all of it. She chose the version of reality she could stomach. Wedding day, August 65. She's 20, he's 23. Her parents had a bad feeling they couldn't articulate. Karen was already gone. The restaurants, the front of the line treatment, the way strangers deferred to her, she tasted power and she wasn't giving it back. For a while, she let Henry's construction story do the heavy lifting. She didn't dig, because digging meant responsibility, and responsibility meant she couldn't enjoy the spoils with a clean conscience. Then Billy Bats. Summer of 1970. Karen wasn't in the bar, but you didn't need to be there to know what happened. You just had to see Henry's face when he walked through the door that night. He looked like a man who'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. And when Bats went missing and the whispers started bouncing around the neighborhood, Karen did the math. Her husband had murdered somebody who was protected by the Gambino family, and there was a clock ticking on their lives from that night forward. 9 years she sat with that. 9 years of wondering if today was the day the bill came due. And she never packed a suitcase, because by then she'd built something, kids, a house, a whole identity, and tearing it down felt worse than the risk of it all collapsing on its own. The gun scene. January 75. Karen discovers Henry's got a whole second life with another woman. Apartment, the works. She shows up with a revolver and puts the barrel right against his sleeping face. The movie captures that fury perfectly. What it doesn't capture is the morning after, because Karen put the gun down and stayed. No lawyers, no moving trucks, no phone call to her mother. She stayed. I think by that point, she'd done a calculation most people never have to do. Walking out meant no more protection, no more income, and a conversation with her family she couldn't bear to have. So instead of leaving, she got smarter. She started actively participating, moving money, relaying messages, holding information that could bury people. When Henry caught a case in the mid-70s, Karen didn't flinch. She already knew the details. She was running triage, not discovering the truth. Henry goes inside, 78, 79, and here's where the story goes, somewhere the movie refused to follow. Karen, alone, mid-30s, 2 kids, takes up with Paul Vario. Let that land for a second. The boss, the man who held Henry's leash, the man everyone in our world answered to. Marty put a breadcrumb in the film, a scene where Paulie gives Karen an envelope and the air between them gets thick. But he never spelled it out, because spelling it out would have cost him the audience's sympathy for Karen, and he needed that sympathy for the third act to work. Vario wasn't some suitor. He was in his 60s. This was about control and access. He kept Karen fed and protected while Henry was locked up, and Karen paid for that in the oldest currency there is. When Henry eventually learned the truth, he ate it in silence. That's what you do in that life. You absorb it and you keep walking. Now I have to talk about Tommy. I brought that man to life on screen, so I feel a responsibility to tell you what the screen left out. Henry's own book says Tommy attempted to assault Karen sexually while Henry was away. She fought back, got free, and went straight to Vario. And the theory, Henry's theory, not just street gossip, is that this is what finally got Tommy killed, not just Billy Bats. Tommy had put his hands on someone Vario had claimed, and Vario settled that account the only way he knew how. The Tommy I played was a bomb with a short fuse, but he wasn't written as a predator. That's where the movie drew its line. The real Tommy was darker than anything we showed you. And Karen survived him face to face, then got up the next day and kept living in his orbit, because by then the accumulation of what she knew made escape a fantasy. She was welded to this life. Lufthansa, December 78. Burke's crew walks out of JFK with $5 million cash, almost $900,000 in jewelry, the score everybody dreamed about. Henry wasn't on the job, but his fingerprints were all over the margins, planning, moving goods, distributing money. Karen tracked the whole thing in real time. She noticed Jimmy coming around more. She saw the household cash jump. She felt the temperature rising. And when Jimmy started cleaning the roster, body after body turning up in creative locations, Karen grasped exactly where that train was headed. Her husband was a loose end, and loose ends were disappearing. Henry's drug habit went off a cliff around then. Dealing and consuming simultaneously, getting sloppy, getting paranoid. And Karen wasn't on the sidelines watching the fire. She was feeding it. Hands-on with the product. Packaging, delivering, keeping the machine running right up until the moment it crashed. That's what the bathroom scene really represents. A woman who started out wanting a nicer life than Brooklyn offered, standing over a toilet, annihilating drug evidence while federal agents stormed her house. That's a hell of a journey. And calling it anything other than active participation is just being polite. Both arrested. May 1980. Trafficking, possession, conspiracy, the kind of charges that swallow decades. Henry saw the writing. Jimmy wanted him dead. The family wouldn't protect him. He cooperated. Total disclosure in exchange for vanishing. And Karen, she could have walked. Could have stayed near her parents, taken a separate deal, started fresh on her own terms. She went with him instead, chose to let the government erase who she was and hand her a new script. Fear was part of it. Henry was about to testify against people who solved problems with bullets. Anyone near him was a liability. But I also think she'd been Karen Hill's wife for so long that the thought of being nobody, having nothing, explaining nothing, that void was more terrifying than another chapter of chaos. The program sent them to Omaha. New names, clean slate. The kids had to abandon everything, friends, schools, any sense of normalcy. Supposed to be a fresh start. Henry made it about 4 years before self-destructing. Back to drugs, back to running his mouth, back to getting arrested, kicked out of witness protection in '87 after a cocaine bust in Seattle. The man simply could not be anonymous. It was a biological impossibility. Karen absorbed all of it, but by 1990, she was finished, filed for divorce, didn't become final until 2002. Over a decade of paperwork to unravel a marriage that had been falling apart since the beginning. She lives today under an assumed name, no public profile, no media, no memoir. Her children published their account in 2004, On the Run, and they described their mother as the only solid ground in an earthquake. The person who somehow kept functioning while the world she'd built burned down around her. So let's stop dancing around it. Was she guilty? The movie says no, or at least not really. It gives you a woman slowly pulled under by forces beyond her control. And that plays beautifully. When Jimmy steers her toward that alley near the end and her survival instincts kick in, your stomach drops. You're with her completely. That's what Marty needed. But truth doesn't care about narrative needs. Karen was informed from early on. She was operationally active. She destroyed evidence under pressure without blinking. Every luxury she enjoyed was financed by crimes she understood perfectly well. Villain? No. But bystander? Not even close. She was the foundation Henry built his criminal life on top of. Without her holding the household together, managing the secrets, absorbing the shocks, none of it functions. There's a fair defense. Leaving a mob marriage isn't like calling a lawyer. It's genuinely dangerous. But plenty of women in that position found a way out. Karen chose not to, and I believe it's because for most of those years, the trade-off still worked for her. Years later, somebody asked Karen the obvious question, why stay? Her answer wasn't about fear or obligation. She said it was the thrill, the rush of living inside something most people only see in movies. She didn't pretend she was a hostage. She admitted she was hooked. That kind of raw self-awareness is almost unheard of from someone in her position. No excuse, no revision, just the uncomfortable admission that she wanted what this life offered and accepted everything it cost. Until the cost overtook the reward. Henry died in 2012, 69 years old, worn out, broke, talking to anyone who'd put a microphone in front of him. Turned his own catastrophe into a traveling show and still ended up with nothing. Karen's still alive, hidden, silent. Her kids built their own lives. And somewhere under a name she didn't choose, she carries the full weight of every decision she ever made. The movie leaves Henry complaining about mediocrity, but Karen's loss runs deeper. Her actual name, the one her parents gave her, is gone. Her family, her history, her sense of self, all of it sacrificed to a life she entered willingly and couldn't exit cleanly. That's what it costs when you know too much and stay too long. You don't just lose what you had, you lose who you were. She saw the murders, she handled the money, she moved the drugs, and for 15 years, every single morning, she decided to keep going, not at gunpoint, by choice, until choice was the one thing she didn't have anymore. That's the version of Karen Hill that never made it to screen. And it matters more than the one that did, because she wasn't the woman this happened to. She was the woman who let it happen, helped it happen, and lived with the consequences longer than anybody else in the story. The real version's always harder to watch than the movie, always messier, always less comfortable, but that's what you get when you stop protecting the characters and start telling the truth.